Hello and welcome to episode number 21 of the Scholastic Sitdown, live on scene from American Heartland Ice Arena in Lincolnwood, Illinois, as Dylan and I just saw the Glenbrook South Titans down the Loyola Ramblers in game number 3 of that SHL quarterfinal. It was quite a game to watch, and we have a lot of hockey to be talking about today. Down the list, we're just going to be talking about the SHL playoffs review, and then we're going to be previewing the only remaining Game 3 and the matchup that we already found out about thanks to this game that just occurred in front of us. From then, we'll look at outside the SHL. Then we'll go through a state review and preview, question of the week, and trivia. No guest today. It is a fairly condensed podcast, but don't worry. Through the next couple of weeks, we will still get some guests as well. So, Dylan, how are we doing today?
Pretty good, and it feels good to be talking to you in person. Obviously, if you're been following along with the podcast, we are on Zoom, and obviously it gets the job done, but there is just a nice element to be sitting here in person. And we're actually here at the bar at American Heartland Ice Arena. We got a nice backdrop here with the Blackhawks Winter Classic, and hey, no better time to do a podcast live from the bar, right? Episode number 21, right? So it's our podcast finally old enough to drink. So
great joke, Dylan. Let's look at the SHL playoff scores that intervened over the last week. Starting off Wednesday, February 12th, the Glenbrook North Spartans on the road because it was a Game 2 against the York Dukes. This one goes to overtime. Glenbrook North wins 3-2, although outshot by the Dukes by 12. In overtime, it was Thomas Hendrickson, a power play goal and game winner. And must I mind you, York started this game up 2-0 and blew that lead throughout the second to OT. And not only one power play goal that had the overtime winner, but a second one in the second period as well. So quite an attack offensively from the Spartans in the second half of that game.
yeah, that was a really entertaining game, and obviously if you remember, that was on Wednesday night. That was the big snowstorm in the Chicago area. So if you're Glenbrook North, you're having to travel. Well, it usually takes about a 30-40 minute drive up to Addison, but in the snow it probably took them a little bit longer, but it ended up being worth it. Like you said, they come back from down 2-0. Josh Robb ties the game with 2 minutes and 20 seconds, I should say. And like you said, Thomas Henriksen with the overtime game-winning goal. And the Spartans were a lot more dominant in Game 1, winning 6-2, but they all count the same, and they get the sweep over York.
Sure do, Dylan. And from then, we would look over to Game 2 between the Loyola Ramblers and Glenbrook South Titans over at the Glenview Ice Center, where the Titans just couldn't find more than one goal past Charlie Trapp, the sophomore, who stopped 42 out of 43. His offense doing enough as well. The goal scorers, Maxim Kading, Matt Klein on the power play, and then Nick Thomas to extend an eventual 2-1 lead halfway through the third period. And get a load of this, Dylan. Well, you don't need a load of it because you already saw it. But the Glenbrook South Titans out shooting the Loyola Ramblers by 30 shots on goal in that game. That is quite the ode to Charlie Trapp to still get the W there.
Yeah, I mean, you just look at the situation, right? GBS, 43 shots on goal was the most they put up in any SHL game this season. Loyola with only 13, tied for the fewest they put up in any SHL game this season. Now take a guess who won the game. Loyola with 3 goals on 13 shots, and the Titans dominant, outshooting the Ramblers by counts of 18-4 in the second period, 14-2 in the third period, but on one of those 2 in the third, Loyola scored, and they sent this game back to American Heartland for Game 3.
And that we just saw, but prior to that, we had our playoff series. 2 of the 4 already decided. GBN moved on from York. New Trier moved on from Lake Forest. But then 2 Game 3s, not something you get too often in the quarterfinals. And we started things off just now at American Heartland Ice Arena. Loyola Ramblers hosting the Glenbrook South Titans as the home team in game number 3. And boy, was it quite the game we just saw. You can always watch the game back on the South Hockey Network. That does a great job. I was honored to be a part of this game with Dylan on the mic. And boy, Glenbrook South ends up winning this one 4-3. We'll just walk you through the scoring real quick. Connor McCauley got things started 54 seconds into this game. Just kind of a goal that just trickles through Thomas Preston, one he was very upset about. Eventually he got himself back in rhythm. And then not too much longer before Adam Sokol, or pardon me, that was the second period that Adam Sokol scored, right?
Yeah, and I think we actually just got a call from Sam Schwartz.
Yeah.
It said some of this scoring was a little bit skewed, so what it says on Game Sheet at the time of our recording is not 100% accurate, but I'm sure it'll get fixed probably before you're seeing this.
Yeah, absolutely, and you can always watch the game film back if you need. Then Aiden Weller would make the Glenbrook South lead 2-1.
Well, I think that was also incorrect because
goodness.
it was
My memory is getting the
1-1.
best of
But
me.
yeah, I don't know who was doing the game sheet down there in the box for Loyola, but a couple of problems there in that one. But that game was 1-1 going into the third, and that third period was just wild.
Yeah, absolutely, Dylan. And 1-1 through 2 periods, you're correct. Then a flurry of goals. We had 4 through a quick span. Orzechowski, Dwyer, Pajerski, and Weller. And then we were 3-3. Weller had a nice shot from the point. He does it again to have the game-winning goal eventually. And I never got a chance to see Jim Philbin after the game, but I wanted to walk up to him and say, hey, you should put Aiden Weller in the NHL All-Star accuracy competition because he was just finding where Charlie Trapp wasn't in that third period, and that ends up being the game-deciding goal as the Titans roll on to the semifinals, and we'll talk about who they're facing in a moment, but let's just reflect on this one real quick, Dylan, because we just saw it with our very own eyes, and it was just at least one of my favorite games I've been a part of this season.
Yeah, 3 goals in the regular season for defenseman Aiden Weller. Gets 2 here tonight at American Heartland Ice Arena. And Luke, you mentioned, you talked about it perfectly there with the accuracy contest. Both goals were from the point, picked the top right corner, and were just beautiful. And Glenbrook South pulls off the seeded upset here. And Luke, it's just starting to become a real talking point. The last 4 seasons, the 6 seed has beaten the 3 seed in the SHL quarterfinals. Not sure if that's just purely coincidence or what, but I mean, I guess it would have to be. It seems like a real curse to be the 3 seed in the SHL these days.
Yeah, and it sure was for the Ramblers, who, by the way, is going to be a part of our trivia question. We'll get to that later. It is quite an insane stat that we might have hinted at on the broadcast. Just a little hint. This might be an easier trivia question than most because it is out there on that game, but we'll get to that later. Now, we have 3 of the 4 series set up, or settled in the quarterfinal, and now we have our first matchup that we know of. So, New Trier, the 1 seed, will be hosting games 1 and 3, if necessary, to the number 6 Glenbrook South Titans, Dylan.
Yeah, and Glenbrook South, I mean, New Trier has had their way with this Titan team so far this season, winning the season series 3-0 in the regular season. If you count another game they played in the preseason, 4-0. And this comes 1 year removed from the Titans sweeping them the year before in that 2023-2024 season. So you could look at that 2 ways, right? New Trier just seems to have their number this year, but you could also say that this Titans team is due. There were a couple lopsided games in that season series, but the last 2 both were decided in overtime, and one of them even in a shootout. So those 2 teams are evenly matched, and we will see what happens. That's going to be a very intriguing series to follow.
And with that, so Glenbrook North beats York. Who's next? Who are they going to play? We don't know yet because 10 days after Game 2 between St. Viator and St. Ignatius, before you'll be seeing this. Now, what am I saying? After this, there's going to be a Game 3 Wednesday night. St. Ignatius, St. Viator, down in Chicago, 8:30 p.m. puck drop. Really excited for that one as SHL Network is going to have the call. So make sure you tune in on YouTube because that winner of that game wins the series and moves on to take on the Glenbrook North Spartans. And whoever the Spartans play, whether it's the Wolfpack or the Lions, that's going to be a fun semifinal series ahead.
Yeah, and that Game 3 is just going to be electric. St. Ignatius takes the first one, 5-4 in overtime with a big third period comeback. Game 2, the very next night, back, 10 days ago, like we said, St. Viator wins that one 5-2. A lot of commotion in the end of the game. And, if you take a look at the game sheet, just penalty after penalty after penalty, these 2 teams are not big fans of each other. And this playoff series has only intensified that. So it sets us up for a really entertaining Game 3. And Luke, I don't care what the final score is. It could be 8-0. That's going to be a very fun game to watch.
Absolutely. And with that being said, here's the pictures for you one more time. New Trier will be playing Glenbrook South, and then the Glenbrook North Spartans await the winner of the St. Ignatius Wolfpack or the St. Viator Lions. With that being said, we have no guests today, so let's jump right into outside the SHL, where, by the way, all three and even the fourth league we're going to be covering today into playoff action and some really deep into championship territory. So let's take a look at that now. So compared to our typical North Central Chicago Catholic League and then Illinois West hockey coverage, we're also adding on the Metro Girls Hockey League. We'll get to that in a moment, but let's look at the North Central Division. The final is set. It's the top two seeds. Number 1, Evanston, is taking on number 2, BGHW. By the way, Evanston knocked out of their first game in state to St. Viator's Varsity 2 team, the biggest upset so far this year in any division, but they are still fighting for what could be a league title. They will get games 1 and 3 at home against the Stampede of BGHW, who are the 1 seed in the combined bracket. February 19th, February 22nd, February 25th are the championship dates. Over to the Chicago Catholic Hockey League. We're entering the semifinals over there. Bennett just won Game 1 against the Fenwick Friars, who ended up sweeping the Notre Dame Dons to get there. And the other semifinal is the Brother Rice Crusaders, who won in 3 against Providence Catholic, taking on the St. Ignatius Wolfpack, who won in 3 against the Marmion Cadets. Over to the Illinois West Division. We have our final set over there, and it is not one that people expected. This is probably the most shocking of them all, because not only the 1 seed Warriors were knocked off in the semifinal, but the number 2 seed Plainfield were knocked off in the quarterfinals. So where does that leave us? Number 3 Maine is the highest seed. We'll be playing the host in game 1 and 3 to OPRF, who ended up sweeping the number 1 Warriors. Maine sweeps number 7 DuPage after it seemed like they were going on a little bit of a miracle run there. Over to the Metro Girls Hockey League. There is a Scholastic division that is higher up. There's a Founders division that is lower down. Barrington did not do well in the tiering, ended up putting them in the Founders division, where they took care of business in their championship game. How did they get there? Well, they beat the Burlington West Grizzlies 5-0, and then they had to meet the Chicago Central Girls Hockey Club in the championship game. After leading 4-2 in the first period, they found 2 in the second, 2 in the third, and Barrington were highly predicted to be champions of that Founders division, and they sure showed it there. Looking over at the Scholastic, the higher up, New Trier is going to, number 1 seed in state, had only 1 goal, and that was enough to beat Glenbrook. Would be interesting to see those 2 teams meet in state, because what a game from New Trier's goalie, Julia Drake, who stops 26 out of 26, and New Trier, champions of the highest division in the MGHL. So that will do it for our Outside the SHL segment. And now let's move on to the tournament that everybody talks about the most, the A-High State Tournament. And with that, let's take a look at last week's Red Division state scores. We'll cover the combined and girls division as those start to begin. Actually, quick highlight, Glenbrook beats Maine. That's the only girls game that has happened so far. As the more start to pour in, we'll start to break those down, and then combine quarterfinals, so on. For now, let's look at red games over the last week. Starting off with Glenbrook South and Neuqua Valley on Wednesday, February 12th. A goal in each period for the Titans as they cruise through. 3-0 win there. And by the way, I'm just going to kind of rattle off these games, and then Dylan and I actually snake drafted 3 games that we each want to talk about, our own top 3 without taking each other's, so we can cover 6 different games in detail. On Thursday, February 13th, Bennett hosted York, not York Black, York White, and they went to overtime, where Bennett would eventually get the win. That was an awesome game. I watched that on live stream. I'll get into that later. The other 2 games on that Thursday, Glenbrook North Gold taking on Deerfield. And by the way, Ben Stein told us a fun fact about this matchup back at the Glenview Ice Center a week or 2 ago, and he said that GBN Gold and Deerfield already met twice this year, and GBN won both of those battles. So the question was, were we going to see another upset that was similar to as big as St. Viator's Varsity 2 beating Evanston? Well, Unfortunately, not this time around. 2 goals in the second, 2 goals from the third from Deerfield. They won that one 4-1. Then last game on Thursday, February 13th, St. Viator, 6-0 victory over the Marmion Cadets, who actually recently beat St. Ignatius, so you still didn't know what's going to happen there. On Friday, another 3 games. Lions was on the road at York Black, the top team. 8 goals for the Dukes in that one, winning 8-2. Loyola, maybe a little bit of a closer contest than they wanted with Hinsdale Central, who had their goalie stopped 40 out of 44, as Loyola won that one 4-1. Then Providence Catholic, an upset on the Fenwick Friars. Unexpected. Celtics score a goal in the first, goal in the second. Fenwick gets one back in the third. It would not be enough. Then OPRF on the road at Carmel. We anticipated this one to be a really good game, but Carmel took it out of sight very quickly. 2 goals in the first period. OPRF would find 1 in the second. Wouldn't be enough. 4-1 victory for the Corsairs there. And by the way, we were on Saturday. 3 more games along the Saturday slot. St. Ignatius hosting Glenbrook South Blue. And a 5-2 win there for the Wolfpack. Pretty interesting. Then New Trier White, their third varsity team, was on the road at Stevenson Green, their varsity won. 4-2 win for Stevenson, but must I mind you, New Trier White actually led after the first period. Then New Trier Green was also in action on the same day. Wow. 7 goals in the third period after leading 5-0 through 2, or 5-1 through 2, pardon me. 12-1 final score against the young St. Rita Mustangs. Then, this was one of my favorite matchups, just anticipating it as well. The Highland Park Giants pull off a huge win on the Brother Rice Crusaders as they were able to claw back within 1 at the end of the game. That was not enough. Then, Lake Forest was hosting Loyola Maroon. That game didn't go how we expected either. Overtime was needed where the Lake Forest Scouts put it away 4-3. And lastly, Glenbrook North playing host to the Sandburg Eagles in their solid offense, but it was no match for the Spartans, who score 8 in total in this one. Final score 8-2. So without further ado and me just rambling much longer, Dylan, I want you to reveal your top 3 games that you selected.
Yeah, Luke, and I'll let you take a breath there. You just listed off every final score there in the round of 32, besides the ones we already covered last week. And a relatively chalk round of 32. Only 3 seeded underdogs taking the victory, and those were St. Viator Varsity 2, Providence Catholic, and Highland Park. In all the other games, the home team, the higher seed, won. So without further ado, I will dive in. At my number 3, top 3 game of the round of 32, I'm going to talk about Stevenson Patriots against New Trier White. Like you said, Luke, a 4-2 win. But New Trier White, as New Trier's third team, plays in the AHL, and they put up a really good fight. 33 shots on goal against the Stevenson Patriots, but Austin Morris solid in net. Stevenson with 4 on 42 shots on goal, including a power play goal. And like you said, 1-0 New Trier White after the first period. But Jenner Layden with the goal for New Trier, and then Brian Wojdelko, Jonathan Outshorn, and James Brown, or Jimmy Brown, I should say, with 3 goals in the final 10 minutes of the second period, blew it open, made it 3-1 heading into the third. Another goal for Stevenson made it 4-1. New Trier gets 1 back with only 24 seconds left in the game, but overall, Stevenson, maybe a little bit of a scare in that first period, but they get the job done. And my number 2 game of the round of 32, I'm going to have to go to another SHL versus AHL matchup. Lake Forest Scouts in against Loyola Maroon. Lake Forest on home ice in this one. Listen, they've got shots on goal as 9-9. So I don't know if that's accurate or not, but if it is, really tough night for the goaltenders. This was a very low-scoring game up until the third period. Noah Kowalski gets the goal in the second period on the power play for the Scouts, and that was it for the first 2 periods. And then in the third, teams traded goals back and forth. Loyola ties it at the 15:48 mark. Lake Forest regains the lead at 15:22. Then at 13:02, Loyola Maroon takes the lead, or ties it again, I should say. Then they take their first lead of the game with 9:23 left. And Lake Forest ties it up, 6:30 left. Xavier Garrix with that game-tying goal. And he would add on to that 1 minute left in overtime, taking the game winner for the Lake Forest Scouts. And, you know, you talk about this matchup, Lake Forest, a playoff team in the SHL, but towards the bottom of the standings, Loyola Maroon, the 1 seed in the Academic Hockey League. So, you know, maybe there were signs that this would be a little closer than some anticipated, but still just a really, really entertaining game that, frankly, could have easily been a very one-sided game. And, you know, with our new friends LAM stream on YouTube, we were able to watch that game on the stream, and you can go watch it back as well. That was very entertaining hockey game. And so without further ado, my number 1 game, and again, we drafted, so we each have different ones. I'm going to go with the Bennett Red Wings at home, taking down York Dukes White. 3-2 overtime game. This was an absolute thriller. Of course, as you mentioned, that one broadcasted on YouTube as well. York takes the lead in the first period, 1-0. That score would stay the same all the way until the intermission. And then Bennett with 2 goals separated by 6 minutes. Michael O'Rourke with 9:07 to go, and with 3:18 to go, Owen Ryle takes the first lead of the game for the Dukes. And then how about this? Davin Frasco takes a penalty with 2:24 to go, putting York on a power play. And Francisco Sanfilippo, younger brother of Nick Sanfilippo from last year's state finalist team, ties the game up with 1 minute left. And then the ultimate redemption for Davin Frasco after taking that penalty that allowed York to tie the game. He gets the overtime winner with 7:31 to go. And the Bennett Red Wings, as the number 7 seed, survive a scare in overtime against the 26-seeded York Varsity 2.
It's a solid top 3, Dylan, but mine are better. Let's look at number 3. This one, I was stuck with the last pick, okay? 12-1 win for New Trier over St. Rita, but why I select this game, Gerard's looking at me funny over there. Why I select this game is just balanced dominance. You would think, oh, somebody on New Trier probably had, 4 or 5 points? No, that's what's crazy. There was nobody on that lineup that had more than 3. And there were only 3 active skaters who didn't have 1 point. So, pretty crazy. The players with 3 points, Hans Huber, Max DeGroot, Nolan Nagitz. And New Trier cruises through, where, by the way, they're taking on New Trier Blue. We'll get to that in a second, in the round of 16 for the 2nd straight year. So that will be interesting, to say the least. Maybe a little bit awkward between some players who maybe practice with each other. But looking on to my 2nd game, this one was awesome. I knew it was going to be awesome because these 2 teams are very similar. Highland Park and Brother Rice. Highland Park ends up winning this one 3-2. Dylan Lansky, who was the best scorer in the IHSHL North Central Division, has the 2nd and 3rd goals for Highland Park, giving them a 3-1 lead. Then with 3 minutes and 26 seconds left, James Esposito, a CCHL All-Star, was able to bring it within 1. But then Sam Schwartz was actually the guy who let us know, hey, Brother Rice, or actually I want to say, I'm forgetting, I'm blanking, but I think Highland Park had an empty netter. Do you happen to remember what he said?
Yeah. It was that Sam was mentioning that Highland Park was inches away from scoring an empty net goal at the end of the game to solidify the game, and then, a couple seconds later, a huge stop on the other end.
Yeah, and that was the goalie in J.C. Aguilar, who ends up getting the win. Actually, crazy I see that name because he was actually initially rostered with the Chicago Crush this year. So he must have left juniors and went to join his high school team that is moving on to the round of 16. And my top game, a game that shocks the world. Providence Catholic, who struggled against Fenwick in the CCHL just compared to standings. Fenwick outshoots Providence Catholic 43-14. But the pure magic of single elimination state games is it doesn't matter how many shots you put on, how much you fatigue the goalie. It's one game to see whichever team can score more than the other. And Providence Catholic on 14 shots scores 2. Fenwick has 1. As Providence Catholic went up 2-0, Charles Bastido was able to find one back for the Friars, but it wouldn't be enough. A ton of power plays given by the Providence Catholic Celtics as well. Fenwick ends up 0 for 6, and Grayson Susaki, stops 42 out of 43 What a game that was, and Providence Catholic is moving on.
Yeah, that looks awfully similar to that Loyola GBS game too, right?
Seriously.
I mean, one shot away from being a perfect picture there. 43-14. I'm pretty sure that was 43-13.
Yeah, and that's what's crazy about the state tournament, because we saw best of 3 series. Loyola ends up winning that game where they get outshot like heck, but Glenbrook South wins game 3. There is no game 2, there is no game 3 here, and that's why Providence Catholic is moving on to the round of 16. So with that being said, we're now going to preview the upcoming games in the round of 16. We have our round of 16 figured out in the state playoffs at the Red Division. So without further ado, we are going to line them down for you. Starting off, it's the 1 vs. 16 matchup, Friday, 8:15 p.m. at North Shore Ice Arena. It's New Trier Green taking on New Trier Blue. This happened last year, and how do you even approach this?
Yeah, this is definitely an interesting game, right? Because it's a competitive state playoff game. You know, winner advances to the neutral site in West Meadows, but you're playing against your buddies, guys who you might have been on the same team with in recent years. And at the end of the day, if you're one of these two teams, you gotta just put that on hold for one night and just play a state playoff game against the other team. And for a team like New Trier Blue, you go in and it's New Trier Green, but it's just such an interesting situation, right? Because you can't take the game for granted. You've got these inter-squad games or scrimmages throughout the season, whether it be practice or what have you. But to have this type of state playoff game, I'm really interested to see how this one goes down and how physical it is.
Absolutely. And then looking down below them, York beat Lions. St. Vitus Varsity 2 upset Evanston. Those two now meet at Addison Ice Arena, 7:20 p.m., a Friday night at Addison in the round of 16. And that will be the last home game for York, because after that, it's headed over to West Meadows Ice Arena for the quarterfinals, then the semis, and then what could be the United Center for their 3rd straight state championship appearance.
Yeah, St. Vitus Varsity 2, that was a huge upset victory over Evanston. And while York and Evanston are only separated by 1 number in the seedings, it's just different when you're playing an SHL team versus a North Central team. So for St. Vitus Varsity 2, a stunning upset, and I'm sure that's going to fuel them, but a long layoff between those two games. February 5th, that round of 32 game. This one's going to be February 21st. So obviously the rust doesn't play into that because they've been playing games, but rust from playing in this single elimination tournament and all the emotions that come with it might be a factor. So, yeah, we will see. Only AHL team left in the A-High State playoffs, St. Vitus Varsity 2. And, of course, this is the Scholastic Sitdown, so AHL is part of that umbrella. So, we definitely love the exposure for the league. And St. Vitus Varsity 2, a huge game to advance and upset the higher seed. And we saw Loyola Maroon and York White also an overtime goal away from doing the same. So it's going to be a big test for them against York, but York has a lot of playoff experience as of recent years, as you mentioned, being at the United Center 2 years in a row. We will see what happens here in this one.
Yeah, and people say, why are you even sending Varsity 2 teams off to the state playoffs, especially Academic Hockey League, where people are like, well, you're just buying a ticket to your death. And you know why? They might not make the state championship, but moments like those where you upset a very solid team in Evanston, that makes it, that for the AHL, that makes their whole year. It's worth it. It's
Absolutely.
worth sending all those teams if you just win one of those games and make a statement to show how deep your league can run. Then, the previous 2 games we just highlighted have Varsity 2 teams. This is the first one down the line that doesn't. St. Ignatius is taking on Stevenson. An SHL matchup there. It's going to be a Monday night, February 24th, 8:40 p.m. puck drop at, of course, Fifth Third Ice Arena down in Chicago.
Yeah, one of what's going to be only 2 all-SHL matchups here. And St. Ignatius, boy, you talk about the schedule that they have to juggle. They've got Game 3 on Wednesday against St. Vitus. Then they've got Friday, Saturday in their first 2 games of the CCHL semifinals, and then they're going to have this game on Monday. And, of course, Monday, February 24th, the deadline for completing this round. So go figure, they just reached the deadline there and really just reached it with the 8:40 puck drop. But St. Ignatius played Stevenson twice down the stretch to end the regular season. And you want to talk about a team on the other side that's probably pretty cold is Stevenson, because they have not played, at least not a meaningful game since, at this point, 2-3 weeks ago now, towards the end of the regular season. So with St. Ignatius, all those games, it's really going to come down to that rust versus rest factor.
I like the way you word that, rust versus rest. Now, St. Viator's Varsity 1 is playing in the next game. They are hosting Carmel Saturday, February 22nd, 5 o'clock p.m. at Mount Prospect Ice Arena. St. Viator coming off that win versus Marmion. Carmel coming off that win versus OPRF. 2 Varsity 1s beating other Varsity 1s to now play another Varsity 1.
And I will actually take back what I said. There's actually 3 all SHL round of 16 games now that I think about it. But, yeah, this is one of them. Carmel Catholic and St. Viator. It's going to be a really similar situation to Stevenson because Carmel hasn't played in a meaningful game since they played St. Viator in the last game of the SHL regular season. And I remember paying attention to that one because it influenced the seeding and all that. And St. Viator actually won that game in the final minute. So Carmel is coming off a fresh, close game against this St. Viator team. And you know that Carmel's going to want some revenge. I thought that they looked really good at certain parts this season and did just miss the playoffs by as the 9th place team just under the playoff line. So don't be surprised if they put up a pretty good fight against St. Viator. So it's actually going to be my game to watch for the round of 16.
I like that. On to the next one. What we could have had been another SHL matchup was ruined by the Providence Catholic Celtics, who will be playing the underdog. Number 18 playing number 2, Glenbrook North. And this game will be Friday, 7:50 p.m. at, of course, the Northbrook Sports Center.
Yeah, and Glenbrook North, you know, they've always been a powerhouse of recent years, but every once in a while they have a season where they are a serious and legitimate favorite to win state. I mean, you know, one of the favorites. New Trier is always the favorite, right? But Glenbrook North, with that number 2 seed, it's going to be an interesting test against Providence. I'm not sure what kind of history they have against each other this season, but I do know for a fact that Glenbrook North and Providence over the last few years do have a couple exhibition games against each other, or non-league, non-conference, whatever you want to call it. So these 2 programs are familiar with each other, whether that be the players, the coaching staff, or the boards. But Providence Catholic, at once a much bigger powerhouse in the state of Illinois. It wasn't too long that they lost the state championship at the United Center. I believe that was back in 2017 against New Trier Green. So a lot of history, Providence Catholic, but Glenbrook North is the favorite by a pretty wide margin. But it's a cliche, but you play the games for a reason.
Absolutely. Anything is possible. Bennett, who escaped York's Varsity 2, will now be playing Deerfield. And outside the SHL matchup, Bennett coming from the CCHL, Deerfield from the North Central Champions Division. This is going to be an interesting matchup. Bennett is the home team, and they will be playing at Seven Bridges Ice Arena at 8:40 p.m. on Friday. Both those teams carry some nice student sections. Should be a rowdy game over there. And Dylan, we haven't seen too much about these 2 teams, but we've also seen Bennett make some statement wins when they have played SHL teams.
Yeah, and you know, we talk about there only being 3 all-SHL games. This is the only fully non-SHL game between 2 teams outside of the top league in the state. So that does guarantee us at least one non-SHL team making it to West Meadows in the state playoffs. But Bennett, as the 7 seed, you know, they're going to be at home on the Olympic ice at Seven Bridges Ice Arena. It's what they're used to. So Deerfield's going to have to make that adjustment. And, you know, both of these teams were favorites in their last game. But Bennett, like you said, comes away with the overtime win against number 26 York White. Deerfield with that 4-1 win over GBN Gold. I don't know. I mean, you've got outside the SHL, like you said, but these 2 teams are in different leagues of their own. Bennett CCHL and Deerfield and North Central champions. So it's going to be interesting. And I mean, as we talk about every game, Luke, it's there might be some lopsided seeds, but every game has a great storyline, and I'm just really excited to see how this round plays out.
And so does the next one. It's Loyola's solid defense backed behind a goaltending punch of Charlie Trapp and Declan Smith against Highland Park's offense. That includes Dylan Lansky, the man who had 2 goals to get them to this point. Highland Park road team, Loyola, of course, the home team. They have the 3 seed, but this game is still to be announced for a date yet, but doesn't mean we still can't preview it at least, right?
Yeah, exactly. And Loyola Gold, they're going to be absolutely hungry for state after what we saw in the SHL quarterfinals. You know, they're a team that usually makes a really deep run in the SHL playoffs. We saw them in the championship last year. We saw them in the semifinals the year before as the 6th seed. So they were, again, at the part of that 6-3 curse. And, you know, this is just a program that has a really deep history and honestly, for lack of a better term, just an expectation to go on deep runs in all of these postseason tournaments. So their early exit in the SHL playoffs, you know, these boys are going to be fired up and put everything they've got into state. Highland Park is going to know that coming in, and they're going to have to really play a smart game and make little to no mistakes if they want to pull out win in this one.
And you know why they would be really hungry to move on? Because the 6th seed is down below them, and it's the Glenbrook South Titans who just knocked them out of the SHL quarterfinals. Glenbrook South has to get by Lake Forest, the 11th seed, to meet them again. And when you talk about storylines, this might be the biggest one, at least just from what we just saw, because even a little bit of a scrum after that game. Those 2 teams do not like each other, but Loyola is going to potentially get a chance to redeem themselves if Glenbrook South beats Lake Forest, and then they can meet at a neutral site on March 1st.
Yeah, and that would make for, 7 games played against one another in 9-game span. So that would really be entertaining. But like you said, the team's got to win their rounds first to get there. And Glenbrook South is at home against a Lake Forest team that actually beat them 2 out of 3 times this season. Lake Forest taking that season series over Glenbrook South. So this is going to be a really interesting game to follow. Lake Forest is going to come in with a lot of confidence, knowing that they've taken care of these guys twice before. And GBS is going to be at home, and they're going to have a tough task as a battle of blue and gold down in that one.
And that date still to be announced. We'll figure that one out soon. You can always go to ahigh.org to check out the brackets, click on events, click on state tournament, whatnot. You'll find it. Don't worry. But that will do it on our state preview. Now let's go to our question of the week and trivia to close things out. Our final 2 segments are here, the question of the week, and then, of course, the trivia question on episode 21 here on the Scholastic Sitdown. Let's look at the question of the week from last week, and we said, what is harder, state playoffs or SHL playoffs? Well, thankfully, Dana Loken has come out of his cave and was able to answer not only the question of the week, but the trivia that we'll get to in a second. But here's his opinion.
What a beautiful answer to the trivia. My gosh.
Can't wait to read that. He also said about state compared to SHL playoffs, he said that state is harder by far. You can't have an off night. Any team can beat any team in the SHL and on any given night. But usually the better team is going to come out ahead in a longer series. I absolutely agree with that one, Dana. And then this week's question of the week is, and we want you guys to answer, what was your favorite SHL regular season series to follow? Not even if you followed it, but what was your favorite one just in general, looking back and saying, wow, that was pretty crazy. Dylan, do you happen to have yours?
Yeah, I'm actually going to say, and this is not biased, Glenbrook South versus Glenbrook North this year. And their 3 games were very entertaining against each other. You start with GBS setting the tone with that 4-2 comeback victory in the North-South game. And you got to remember, going into this game, GBN is already sitting as the number 2 team in the state. So GBS, with a lot of recent success over GBN in recent years, I think 8-1 versus them in the last 9 regular season games. They get that 4-2 win and take a 1-0 lead in the series. However, Glenbrook North claws back in game 2, winning 2-1. Actually held the Titans to only 1 shot on goal in the first period in that game at Glenview Ice Center, and that set up an all-decisive game 3 at Northbrook. The teams were tied 1-1 going into the third, and with a minute left, Charlie Walker scores the game-winning goal. I think it was actually 55 seconds, and the Spartans added an empty netter to make it 3-1. So GBN not only takes the season series from GBS for the first time since pre-COVID, but actually wins a regulation game in the regular season against GBS for the first time since pre-COVID. So just, those rivalry games are always really entertaining, and it's even better when all three games live up to that hype.
Yeah, and I'm picking a rivalry that has slowly made its way to one of the top in the SHL. And before this year, it wasn't talked about too much. That's because one of the teams wasn't in the SHL as of the last couple of years. And St. Ignatius comes in, and this year especially, they play St. Viator down to the wire. We said in a couple episodes ago that every regular season matchup was 4-3. Then you have an overtime game in Game 1. Then Game 2 ends up being cinematic, shows the rivalry in the finish with all that physicality. Now a Game 3 coming on Wednesday, tomorrow, because you're seeing this on Tuesday. And let me tell you, I jokingly called it the Battle of the Saints at the start of the season. I did not think that it was actually truly going to be that good of a battle every time, making it so much fun to watch. And by the way, SHL Network, Wednesday night, 8:30 p.m. If you don't want to spend your Wednesday weeknight at 8:30 p.m., in Fifth Third Arena, you can watch it online, so don't worry. But your attendance is still highly encouraged. So that is my pick on my end. Now, last week's trivia question, Dylan.
Yeah, it was, we had Max Anderson on the podcast as our guest, so we thought a fitting question would be, when was the first SHL Network broadcast in history? And it was not an easy trivia question, of course, because SHL Network didn't migrate to YouTube until 2018. So there were 2 seasons worth of games predating that. I believe it was on High School Cube with Max Anderson and Jimmy the Wiz Olsen. And we got an answer in the comments. And Dana, you absolutely nailed it. Luke, why don't you read that off?
Oh, my goodness. Here we go. So Dana Loken comes back and he says, it was a beautiful 56 degrees with a small breeze at puck drop on an historic night, just 9 days before Halloween in 2016. While the younger siblings had dreams of costumes and candy, the varsity teams had work to do. 6:10 start at Heartland Ice Arena. Look where we're placed, by the way. American Heartland Ice Arena is where we're filming this game. Not reading off today's script. I'm reading out of my mind right now. Now, back to the script. As the action ensued, Loyola would take a 2-goal lead into the first intermission. They continued to build on the lead, scoring 2 more in the second before Stevenson was able to get 1 back before the end of that frame. That would be your final score on this glorious night for Illinois hockey in full 360p. Loyola 4, Stevenson 1 on 10/22/16. Then he puts a special note that 10/26/16 was not a Saturday, and the game was actually played on 10/22/16 according to the game sheet.
Well, Dana, listen, you've been so on top of the trivia all season long. That's got to be the answer of the year. And I hear the horns and the audience clapping, and Luke will have to get that in the editing at this point now. But
Nope.
question of the year, or I should say answer of the year by Dana Loken. And listen, I don't know if ChatGPT had anything to do with that, but that was beautiful and nearly drew a tear to my eye here at Heartland.
This week's trivia question, something that had to do with the game that we just saw. So, Loyola just got knocked out in the quarterfinal. Not counting this game, not counting this series, beyond this year, when was the last time Loyola got knocked out of the SHL quarterfinal prior to this season? And who was it against? So, no more hints. I gave you one earlier. So if you only come for the question of the week in the trivia, you missed on a hint that I gave earlier on in the episode. That's your fault. You're supposed to watch the whole thing. But Dana, thank you so much for participating. Hopefully we see some more people start to rattle in answers. Even if you don't know, just guess. It's an extra credit point. All you got to do is just answer, okay? So that will do it for episode number 21 of the Scholastic Sit-Down here.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
On SHL Network. We hope you enjoyed watching us live on the scene, getting to actually talk to each other instead of through a screen. And Dylan, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I thought more people would want to see us in our suit and ties, but we did not get our 10 comments on last week's episode. So we're gonna do it again. Why not? So if we get 10 comments from 10 different people, we will be in full suit and tie for next week's episode. So that offer still stands. So make sure, and it can't just be a random comment. You got to answer the trivia or the question of the week.
Just throw a
guess.
Right?
Or just make a comment that's worthwhile. It just can't be like a space bar. Just so you can get us in the suit and tie. You have to actually have some substance in there. So that offer is going to stand. So if you want to see me and Luke in full suit and tie, 10 comments from 10 different people. That's all we need.
Thanks for watching this episode. Big thanks to Gerard Boris, who helped get us set up on the live scene after the GBS game, getting to recap the one after seeing it with our very own eyes. This has been Dylan Ward. My name is Luke Jordan, signing off, and we will see you for episode number 22 next week after a chaotic week of SHL and state playoffs. See ya.